absolutely delighted to be here this morning and have an opportunity to talk about how do we better manage our energy and our well-being, because ultimately that helps to drive our performance. And when we have lots of energy, when we really own that title, CEO, Chief Energy Officer, we can move mountains, right? We've got the ability to bounce back. We get physical, emotional, and mental energy. We can mobilize different forms of energy when we need it, which is essential, especially in the business of startup and leading and creating change, and in the context of this fast, rapid changing, uncertain world that we find ourselves in. However, with the context of the world that we find ourselves in, most of us, almost everybody, is exhausted, is tired in some way, because prolonged uncertainty causes a lot of stress on the body. So my agenda for today is to recap the fundamentals that we know can help support good energy, good performance, good well-being, and make sure that you leave with one thing, not three, definitely not more than that, to take into your lifestyle so that you can create some kind of change. Because all the stuff I share, often people know, right? It's not rocket science. However, we're not doing it, because this common knowledge is just not common practice for various reasons, one of them being stress and the pace of life and lack of motivation. And so I really want to encourage you to take one thing and to know that I'm available. So if you want to reach out to me after today, because it really is just a rapid tour, and for some of you that are listening, this will be just enough. You'll be like, that was great, great reminders, I've got something I can tweak. But it could also be like, wow, I'm really struggling with my well-being and I need support. And all of us need support. I have support. I've got mentors and people that I reach out to. So feel free to reach out to me. I'll share my contact details at the end and you can get them through Ollie. And if I can help you, I will. If I can't, I'll certainly find somebody who can. Because a bit like driving long distances, I've been starting to drive again. I mean, I was in Wales last week, Mansfield, Norwich. And I was reminded about how when we're in a car driving, there's so much around us that's not controllable. There's so much we can't control, traffic, diversions. We can leave with ample time but still run late. Someone can swerve in front of us, there's a lot of complexity. We can choose, however, two things. We can choose to grip the steering wheel, lean forward, frown, clench our jaws, have this inner critic that comes up and shouts at everybody and ourselves for not leaving on time and running late. And that can drain our energy and leave us feeling exhausted by the time we get to where we need to be. Or we can accept that there's only so much we can control. And one thing we generally have control over is ourselves. And so we can loosen the grip on the steering wheel, relax our face, allow our shoulders to drop to the ground, relax our jaw, and take a few deep breaths. And that can create a sense of calm despite the chaos. And why is that helpful? Because it helps the nervous system relax. So that when you want to sleep at night, you can. You don't end up feeling tired but wired. It can also save energy so that you can mobilize that energy that we just spoke about for other important things. So I'm all for theory, but more importantly, I'm all for practical. So on the note of talking about the nervous system and stress and our breath, I'd like to invite us to do an exercise together. I'm going to set my timer for 1 minute, so 60 seconds. I'll let you know when we start and when we end. And what I invite you to do is to count how many breath cycles you take in the minute, ideally without changing your breath. Now, I know because I've asked you to become conscious of your breath, you probably are going to change it, but ideally don't change it. And an inhale and an exhale is one breath cycle. So are you ready? Starting in 3, 2, 1. Bring your awareness to your breath. And I invite you to count how many breath cycles you take over the next minute. It may help to take your eyes off the screen so you're not distracted. Close them only if you're comfortable to do so and it's safe to do so. And if your mind has wandered, that's all right. Without judgment or criticism, gently bring it back to your breath. There we go. That's a minute. If you're happy to share in the chat, won't you put in how many breath cycles you took in that minute? I'm just curious to see how we're showing up in this moment, because the breath gives us valuable information into how the nervous system is feeling. Thank you. So there's already quite a range. We have from 6 to 15, and we have 10 with a question. I'll answer that. So why the breath? When we are feeling stressed, when the nervous system is stressed, one of the first things that shifts is the cardiovascular system. So the heart beats a bit faster. That's in order in response to the adrenaline that comes from the adrenal glands, to get blood flowing to your limbs so that you can move towards whatever the stress is or away from it. I'm sure you're familiar with the fight or flight response. It's an innate primal response that happens whether a car swerves in front of us, whether we see an email, whether we wake up with an alarm, whether we have a thought at 2 o'clock in the morning. Whatever the perceived or real stress is, the chemical physiological reaction is the same. And so paying attention to our breath can give us some great insights into how we're feeling. And when we consciously slow down our breath, magic happens within seconds. You only need to take 2 or 3 slower, deeper breaths to activate what we call the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system. The way I remember that is it sounds like paradise. Paradise makes me think of hammock, the sound of beach waves, and relaxation. So when we breathe deeply and slowly, we create a sense of paradise inside the body, to put it simply. So ideally, what we want to try and achieve, this is what the research is showing, is 6 to 8 breath cycles per minute. So those of you that are in single digits, amazing, amazing. If you're at maybe 12 or higher, don't panic. This is just great insight that maybe you're taking more shallow, faster breaths, which is an indication that your nervous system could be hypervigilant. And by breathing a little slower, a little deeper, you can bring on a sense of calm, and you can release other hormones like oxytocin and dopamine and serotonin that help you stay more calm despite the chaos that might be going on around you. So yeah, just a little practical exercise. If that's the one thing you take from today, could you do the mindful minute maybe at midday or in the middle of your afternoon or between critical meetings? Because sometimes just being aware of, oh, I'm taking 15 breath cycles in a minute, or maybe 20 or 25, like somebody in the group I was with yesterday. When we're conscious of something, it's easier to then make conscious change. And when we talk about performance and well-being and the nervous system, we speak about so many different things that may help to contextualize it. And when I speak about well-being, I speak about our physical well-being, so that relates to our body. So that's the breath, like we just did, our physical fitness, our nutrition, our energy levels. We also have things that relate to our heart, our emotional well-being. We have our mind, our intellectual or mental well-being. And then we have the sense of meaning, which is the ability to have a purpose, contribution, belonging, giving back. And all of these are important. However, in my experience, and I know this for myself, if your physical well-being, let's say your body is sleep deprived and dehydrated, and maybe you have headaches, it's going to be very difficult for you to optimize your emotional well-being or to show up at your best mentally, let alone have energy for contribution and meaning and giving back, right? So how do we make sure that we have a solid foundation, that the fundamentals are in place to support this body? Because when we're feeling stressed, the body responds before the conscious mind. So yes, mental health is important, and yes, emotional regulation and stress management is important, but it's so much easier when the body is there to support it with a solid foundation. So without overthinking it, if you're happy to share in the chat, you can, or write a number down out of 10. What would you score your physical well-being at today? 10 being outstanding, amazing, you're feeling great, and of course the lower numbers being you're needing a lot of help or a little. So we've got, 7, 8, 7. Great, some high scores, I like that. So what I'd like to take you through over the next 10 minutes, so it's going to be what I call a Kontiki tour. So when I was a teenager, I always wanted to go on Kontiki, which were these tours that you went on in a bus with others around Europe or somewhere in the world, and you saw like 10 cities in 10 days. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to visit 10 destinations that are critical to well-being, and then we're going to get an opportunity to score ourselves on the WELLculator and see what your actual score today is, and potentially find an opportunity for tweaking and for improvement. So the first 4 points on the WELLculator relate to how you feed yourself. And what I find is we often strategize in our businesses, right? You wouldn't be on this call if you weren't that kind of person. But we don't make the most about strategizing on how we refuel and feed ourselves so that we have energy and good health. What I often come across is this kind of lack of strategy, I guess. We wake up in the morning and, I don't know, it could be pets, it could be children, it could be all kinds of rushing. So we end up grabbing a cup of coffee. We have back-to-back meetings, whether we're working in the office or at home or on the road. When we stop for lunch, we don't really stop because we maybe have our screens around us, phones, we're maybe making calls, we're still checking emails. Our energy will likely drop in the afternoon, and so we look for a snack, maybe something salty, maybe something sweet. By the time we get home and relax, we're so famished that we eat more than we need, maybe more carbohydrate based than it should be, maybe even with wine and chocolate that bookends that. So I don't know if anybody relates to any aspects of that, but what I'd like you to take a look at is what is the dominant color on that screen? And I'm sure you'll agree it's a brown or a beige. And that's the one thing I want to plant a seed with in terms of strategic refueling, is how could we shift that to look more like this? So if you are choosing to have breakfast, snacks or lunch, to ensure that you bring in color, and by color I don't mean wine gums or M&Ms or Skittles, I mean color from nature's color palette, so fresh produce. I'll explain in a moment why these foods are so essential, especially in the context of COVID and immunity, because they really are vital for our gut. In the afternoon, when you're feeling tired, ask yourself, have you actually stopped for lunch? Now, I'm not suggesting that we stop like the Spanish and have a siesta. I am suggesting that maybe we stop for 15 to 20 minutes, because that's how long it takes for your stomach to let your brain know that you've had enough to eat. And also, if you're working an 8-hour day, I'm guessing most of us are working more than that, 10, 12, maybe 14. It absolutely makes sense. If you were going on a 14-hour drive, that at least halfway you would stop and refuel and take a break, a physical break, a mental break, an emotional break. And as leaders, as business leaders, we need to be able to have big picture thinking, right, and not get pulled into that stress response which narrows cognitive function. And one way to do that is halfway through your day, gift yourself 15 to 20 minutes away from screens to just think about what's happened today, what still needs to happen, how am I feeling, how do I want to feel, not just what I need to do. And when our energy drops in the afternoon, to think about, are you hydrated? This is a quick win. So how do you know that you're hydrated? We should be drinking 1 glass of water per 10 kilograms that we weigh. So if you're weighing 80 or 100, you need 8 to 10 glasses of water. If you weigh less, you have less body weight, so you can get away with less. Also, if your energy levels are low, to ask yourself, have you moved or have you been sitting for hours? Because sitting is the new smoking, and that drops our energy, slows down our metabolism, compromises our posture. And have you had fresh air? And you know, today is a beautiful day. We've already spoken about the weather. It's easier to go outdoors. But summer only makes up, 4 to 5 months of the year. When it's not sunshine, and maybe it is raining, we still need to be aware of whether we're spending time outdoors, because nature is a food group. It's incredibly important for soothing the nervous system and reminding us to move and walk and breathe and get fresh air. This kind of strategy makes it easier to potentially eat better in the evening, because that's when we generally pay the price for being stressed and busy. That's when cravings kick in and we end up crashing on the sofa, maybe in front of, binge watching whatever. We watch YouTube, Netflix, and then it's easier to then maybe overeat, overdrink. So I'm curious, how does your strategy in terms of the way that you feel compare to what I've just shared? And whatever your strategy is, if you're choosing to eat a certain way, I don't know, paleo, intermittent fasting, cutting out foods, going on a detox, taking supplements, how do you know that all this stuff works? It's incredibly important to measure. So when you're strategically refueling, when you're eating to support your gut health, maybe making a focus on eating more colorful foods, being more mindful, hydrating and thinking about the other things that you drink. We know our business numbers. I know that you know that. We need to be. But what about the return on investment in terms of your health numbers? So I'm curious if anybody here on the call is measuring anything around their well-being. Cholesterol, let me spell that right. But specifically these two things. So we should be checking our cholesterol and our blood glucose, a bit like an MOT with your car, I'd say once a year, because stress impacts those numbers very quickly. And when those numbers change, when your cholesterol goes up, your glucose is perhaps not balanced, you predispose yourself to inflammation and aging, but specifically to diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and type 3 diabetes, which is Alzheimer's and other forms of cognitive decline, and certain cancers. Now, those 5 conditions that I just mentioned are not happening to other people. They are the leading cause of morbidity and mortality today. And the good news is that little tweaks in our lifestyle can make a big impact. So we don't have to always go onto chronic meds. And what we know, and this could be interesting for you in terms of your business, if you've got a team that you're supporting, could you help them to know some of their health numbers? Because we know through insurance research and looking at trends that prevention really is better than cure. That we save a fortune if we can help somebody potentially know that they are hypertensive or might be pre-diabetic before actually being diagnosed. But for you personally, if you want to be your own chief energy officer, and if you want to personalize your health plan, then checking these kind of things is essential. I mean, I personally check for much more than just cholesterol and blood glucose. I don't know if anybody has done any of these kind of tests, but you can do DNA tests, which are called nutrigenomics. So we look at your genetics and then tell you exactly what your blueprint needs around potential supplements, to what kind of exercise is good for you, your brain health. So I discovered why I have insomnia by doing these kind of tests. And so I could alter the strategy that I use to help myself fall asleep. And these tests are super more convenient and affordable to do nowadays. You know, you can order them online. You don't even need to go to your GP and put further burden on the NHS. You can order tests from companies like, let me put in 2 examples. Thriver, Fourth for Life are 2 companies that I know that you can order kits online. You can check your vitamin D status, for instance. If you're taking any supplements like magnesium, you can check whether you're actually absorbing them. I had an incident a year ago where I wasn't absorbing magnesium or vitamin D, and I thought that I had really bad anemia. I actually thought I had entered menopause overnight because I just instantly started having night sweats and I had a lot of brain fog. But I think I just had a deficiency and I was stressed. My 3rd trip to South Africa was cancelled. My parents were sick. My dog had died. And it just all became too much. So I got to my edge of burnout. And that's one of the points on the WELLculator that I'm going to ask you is, do you know what your signs are that warn you that potentially you're getting to your edge?
Not loud. Okay.
Very huge cost if you potentially get past the edge. What can help? So good diet is key, and hydration, and checking your health numbers. But what's also critical when we're performing at the level that we are as business leaders is to cultivate enough self-care and to look at how we rest and sleep. So who on this call, maybe just pop a yes or a thumbs up, would like more sleep or better quality sleep? Yeah, a lot of us. So sleep is a complete conversation on its own. What I'd like to highlight is something that we don't often think about. The way that we end our day, wonderful, Gary, that you sleep okay. It's such a gift. The way that we end our day, so our ability to sleep starts with how we start our day. And many of us, we start our day, and would you agree that when we start our day, our nervous systems are probably going to be the most relaxed they are in a day? So the longer we can linger in that more relaxed state, the better, because we stay in that parasympathetic state. Remember that paradise state? That enables rest and repair. It boosts your immunity. It helps with emotional regulation, memory consolidation. But most of us are not spending enough time in that. We wake up, and perhaps this is you, before we check in with ourselves and our own emotional well-being, we're engaging with the outside world. So we're getting news and media and WhatsApps and emails, perhaps even before we've gone to the bathroom for the first time. That means we then show up in a certain way. So Brene speaks about this. We put on armors and we have masks and we alter the way that we feel. And then the energy drain starts, right? So our energy, we wake up with hopefully a full battery, I know many of us are not waking up with a very full battery, but it will start to drop. And so thinking about how you start your day and how could you possibly gift yourself. Ideally, I mean, a lot of the research is showing that we need maybe an hour to an hour and a half at the beginning and the end of our day to tune in and to tune out. But even just starting with 15 minutes is a great way to start. Maybe getting up, making that cup of tea, then looking at your phone. If you're used to doing it instantly. And then bringing in little micro moments of recharge during your day is very helpful. So things like the 20-20-20 guideline is every 20 minutes. So maybe now try this. Look 20 feet away from your screen and blink your eyes for 20 seconds. So you might need to look behind you if you need to look further away. I've got a beautiful window outside. And that helps us to remember that there's stuff going on around us when we're sitting for hours behind our screens. And if you can, every hour, to be conscious of your breathing, your posture, and maybe gifting yourself a quick stretch, time to hydrate. And that means we need to think about our meeting culture, right? We can't have online meetings that end at 10 and start at 10. We need to think about maybe meetings need to always end at 5 to the hour so that we've got a little bit of room to go and nourish ourselves and make sure that we stay energized. So as we move on from the topic of rest and self-care and how we allow ourselves permission to have micro moments of rest, we also need to think about whether we're cultivating a positive mindset. Because when we have lots of uncertainty and stress, the mind goes into worry and negative emotions much easier. Happiness, joy, appreciation, gratitude take effort. It's a bit like going to the gym. If you work your bicep muscles, they get stronger. If we work our neural pathways around positive mindset, they get stronger. So have you got some kind of practice, maybe a gratitude practice, or maybe mindfulness or meditation, or some kind of practice that helps you soothe your nervous system and gives you an opportunity to not live in the future around worry or maybe some anxiety around the past? I've mentioned already the importance of moving your body during your work day. We cannot sit for longer than an hour at a time. So things like having a sit-stand desk, or being aware of getting up and getting water, or having walk and talk meetings, or taking a quick walk in the middle of your day can really help with keeping your energy levels up for the afternoon. And then, of course, we also need intentional exercise. So we need about half an hour on most days of the week. And what's very important is to include cardiovascular exercise, so getting our heart rate up, weight-bearing exercise, especially when we're over 40, because we lose lean muscle and our metabolism drops because of that. But stretching, I find the third one is the one that we often compromise on. So we need to stay flexible and supple as we get older. And then the last point on the WELLculator, which I've mentioned, is are you noticing consciously before it's too late? So before you have a reaction, or you shout out in anger, or you send an email with the wrong tone, or before you've got a tension headache because you're clenching your jaw, do you notice that you're stressed? Because your body responds to stress before your mind does. And are you able to regulate it? Such as using the mindful minute. That's why I started with that one practical exercise. So what is your score on the WELLculator? Let's go through it quickly. I'll remind you. You answer yes. If you answer yes, you give yourself a point. And if you answer no, no point. So do you strategically refuel, and are you sustaining your energy? Yes or no? Are you eating like an artist and supporting good gut health? So that means you have a minimum of 5 portions of those colorful, fresh produce foods in a day. Would you say that you practice let's just focus on lunch. So most days of the week, are you gifting yourself a 15 or 20-minute lunch where you disengage and actually pause and stop and recharge? Are you hydrating enough? So are you having a glass a glass of water for every 10 kilograms that you weigh? Are you checking your health numbers, especially things like cholesterol and blood glucose? Are you thinking about your strategy for rest with specific focus on how you start your day and gifting yourself opportunity to rest during the day through a mindful minute, through a quick lunch, through pausing between meetings, standing and stretching, or just taking your eyes off your screen if that's the least that you can do? Have you got some kind of practice that helps you cultivate a positive mindset? That can be meditation, mindfulness, gratitude. Are you moving your body during your workday? So not just sitting for hours at a time. Are you being intentional with the type of exercise that you do? And are you including stretching as part of that regime? And then lastly, do you know, not just do you notice your stress, but have you got techniques that can help you regulate your stress in the moment? So you don't need to wait for a weekend or a holiday. So things like taking slower, deeper breaths. And perhaps if you're happy to share, what is your WELLculator score today? And it might be curious to compare your actual WELLculator score with the score that you subjectively gave yourself at the beginning. So thank you, Harry, for being on the button. So you've got a score of 6. 1, lots of nearly. That's great to see. 7, 6, amazing. So when it comes to the WELLculator, the higher the score, not necessarily the better, right? Because your score could be 9 out of 10, but the one that you answered no to is that you don't get enough sleep. Perhaps you're chronically sleep deprived. And that's really serious for your health risk, right? So whether your score is 1 or whether it is 8, there's always something that we can potentially refine. And now this is where, as we end off, I'd like you to think about, if you were to increase your WELLculator score over the next few weeks by just half a point or 1 point, what would be your personal pledge? What would be one small thing that you would do, and you would make it super obvious and easy to do, so no matter how stressed you are, how busy, you have a 100% chance of actually putting it into practice? Because that's the important thing about behavior change, is consistency. Many of us can go on crazy diets and exercise regimes for a few weeks, but then can we sustain it? And what I like about the WELLculator is that it reminds us that there really are small things that if we're consistent at, that can create a big impact. And when we do that, when we start by doing what's necessary, we can then over time become like we're doing the impossible. I personally found this. When I started with cold showers, it was impossible for me to think of being cold. And I started with 10 seconds at the end of a warm shower. And then I ended up doing cold swimming 2 years later for like half an hour at a time. So what will be, let me bring up the WELLculator for a moment, again as a reminder, what will be your pledge today? What is something that you're going to commit to doing as soon as possible that will help increase your score over the next few weeks? Thank you, Ali. Stretching. By the way, the 5 Tibetan rites is a great way to bring in 5 minutes of stretching at the start of your day. Focusing on eating like an artist, that's great. If you want any resources on how to do that, I can help. So on that note, because if all this stuff was easy, we would all be doing it. We'd be healthier, happier, fitter, and I wouldn't have a job. It's not that easy. So if you would like some help from me, there's 2 things I can do for you. Mostly every Wednesday, about 2 Wednesdays a month, I send out what I call a Wellbeing Whisper, which is a quote or an interesting thought about what's happening in the world of well-being and something that you can do. And then I also send out a recipe, which is things that I make. I'm not a chef, but I try and do my best around making quick, easy meals that are colorful. And so I take photographs and then I send them out as a recipe. And of course, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. That might be a great place for us to stay connected, because I write and I post quite regularly. And please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions around your well-being. We need more energized, resilient, healthy, well, happy leaders. Because when you are, that is contagious, disproportionately so by virtue of you being a leader. And that's how we can potentially leverage and lift the rising tide of well-being overall. Thank you. I love the personal pledges in the chat. And perhaps this might be a good opportunity to open up for questions and see if there are any. There was a...
Thank you very much, Celynn, for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any questions from anyone at all? Anyone?
Yeah, I'll ask one.
Go on, Tim.
Let's say a really insightful talk. So I've certainly got some takeaways from that. When you talk about doing this DNA testing, what do the reports look like that come back?
Oh gosh, you can get sample. I can email you sample reports. Send me a note, and so I'll send you a version of one or two. I mean, there's 5 or 6 different tests you can do. You know, mind, heart, hormones, and I'd be very happy to share with you sample reports. Or if you want to, you can look at DNA Life. Is that yeah? On their website, and you can see the different DNA tests that they do, and they all have sample reports, so you can see what you pay for.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
And if you need help deciphering it, then reach out to a nutritionist or a dietitian, because you can spend a lot of money and then they end up being shelf developments. You know, they just reports that sits on your shelf. You want to take them and then change the way that you eat and supplement and move.
Harry,
Yes, I mean, hi, Celynn. Thank you so much. As always, incredibly useful. Just one question. I think I got the water per kilo. Is it? The water thing. I'm always quite curious about how much we should drink.
One
And I
glass.
try and keep a glass of water on the desk all the time. But is there I didn't quite understand or get the amount that you mentioned.
One glass per 10 kilograms is a good guide, and a
Right.
glass is 250 mils.
Right, 250 mils. Is that, sorry, that's sort of medium size.
Three,
That's a sort of tumbler, isn't it?
3 ounces. Yeah, it's a bit more than this. This is quite a small cup. It's a bit more than that.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, great.
Show me the glass that's on your desk if it's there. How much do you weigh?
In kilos,
Yes,
uh,
the formula
about
works.
about 87, I think.
So have 8 of those glasses a day, and you're good. And if you're drinking herbal tea, that counts as water because it's caffeine free, so it's not a diuretic.
And sorry, one other question about that you just remind me of. I was told after a sporting event the other day by a trainer there, and I'd never heard this before, that if you drink beer after heavy exercise, it actually hydrates you better than water. Is that true?
That's terrible advice
Oh,
because that could cause dehydration. What he's saying, plain water
yeah.
sometimes doesn't have enough salt or electrolyte. So after exercise, I would have water with, you can buy those sachets of electrolytes, magnesium, potassium, sodium, put that
Yeah.
in. Or even just put a pinch of molten salt, a very good quality salt, and then it will be absorbed faster. Please don't have anything with alcohol, because what that does is it can also make you unaware of potential muscle damage that you have, because you'll feel quite giddy and good from the alcohol, and you may not stretch properly, and then you can cause cramping. Don't have the beer.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely. Thank you. I thought
Or
that sounded odd.
have the beer at the pub with your mates, but not as
Yeah.
part of your hydration strategy.
Yeah, I thought that sounded odd. Thank you. Thank you very much, Celynn.
Sure.
Celynn, we'll always try our luck. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So coffee is not, too much coffee is bad, to answer your question, Gary. And too much would be, if you're very stressed and the nervous system is hyper vigilant, caffeine just makes that worse. So some people who meditate, who exercise, can get away with maybe more caffeine than somebody who's super choleric or intense. Also, if you've got digestion issues, which often happens with stress, like heartburn, indigestion, or irritable bowel, like constipation and bloating, caffeine is really bad for your digestive system. So it is individual, but I would always try and have less than 3 cups of coffee a day, and ideally not on an empty stomach. So first have warm water with maybe some ginger or a cup of tea, then have coffee. Otherwise, it can be quite irritating. But I mean, I've got a double espresso here, so I have a really good quality coffee in the morning, which I enjoy. But it's not the very first thing that I drink. I hope that answers the question.
Divya, have you got a question for us?
No, it was just to add on to that hilarious comment, that advice that Harry was given. I think, I don't know if some of you know, I was a clinical pharmacist for 6 years. So I took a bit of interest in well-being and, you know, good lifestyle. So yeah, another thing to add.
We lost Divya.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Cut out there.
Yeah, sorry. The other thing is, you know, when you exercise, obviously you're super dehydrated, and then if you're having beer to replenish, you know, those lost electrolytes or water, you then can end up fainting because your body is trying to like go into overdrive to try and compensate. So definitely do not have beer after a workout as the first thing you drink. you know, the pub scenario makes complete sense, but definitely a bad idea. And the other thing to add to that is, I know that you mentioned about vitamin D as well. That's something I tell everyone to take as well, and I'm sure you'd agree, Celynn. So thank you so much for mentioning that. As someone of color, you know, I don't absorb vitamin D because of, you know, the way their kidneys are designed, and I actually get my tests done as well as part of my, you know, my routine, as I have done forever. And I was vitamin D deficient, and I'm someone that always goes on holiday. I spend as much time as I can out in the sun. Even my family who live in Singapore were all vitamin D deficient. So if there's one thing that you need to add into your vitamins, or, you know, something you should start taking, definitely make that vitamin D. And of course, we all know the links with COVID and being vitamin D deficient, but I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Celynn. It'd be good to know, because that was an awesome talk as well. Thank you. I really enjoyed and connected with a lot of the points. Something that's close to my heart. So yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. No matter who you are and what you're taking, check that it's working. So I was taking vitamin D. I came from South Africa. I was always in the sun, and my nutrigenomic tests told me that I might have a defect in my receptor that absorbs vitamin D, like you. So I had to up the dose and take a different format, an oil versus a pill, and then I absorbed it. So I always say to people, check, because you don't just want to take supplements and then you make expensive urine, and also your gut has to be healthy to absorb the vitamins that you're taking. And most of us aren't doing the basics to support good gut health.
Yeah.
But well done on being so proactive about your well-being.
Oh, of course. And then again, I guess the other thing to add on to that is, you know, calcium and vitamin D and magnesium, they're all linked. So if you guys are going to get your test done, make sure you get both calcium and vitamin D checked, because if you're low on one, you can't absorb the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.